Hello and welcome to Work to Game. My name is Brian, and in today's video we're doing a boss walkthrough for, we're going to just say, Bozjan's epic 24-man raid, Delubrum Reginae. I apologize, unfortunately, that is some words that I absolutely struggle with. As this is a boss guide and there are a lot of bosses to be had in this raid, you can check the playhead of YouTube or in the description of this video to jump to any specific boss that you want to see the mechanics for. Now, as this is also a guide, note that we'll be showing the bosses their names and talking about them and their mechanics. So if there's anything you want to avoid spoiler-wise, just note you can come back and check out this video in the future if you so choose. Now, being that this is tied to Bozjan, you will have your lost actions, which you can unlock via the Bozjan Southern Front. Also along these lines, as you die, you will lose metal, and there's not metal to be gained within the raid currently at the time of this recording, so just note to go in as prepared as you can be. So, without further ado, let's dive into our first boss, Trinity Seeker. So at first look, Trinity Seeker is going to give you some Ravana vibes, and that's going to come into handy if you remember the Ravana fight to some degree. Now overall, you're just going to have, obviously needing to be put out a lot of damage and do a lot of healing, but pay close attention to the way that the level is laid out. That's going to come into play later. Now he's going to have a room-wide AoE that's Verdant Tempest, so healers be paying attention to that. Then he's going to follow that up with first, second, third, and fourth Mercy. Pay close attention to where the swords are lit up, because this is going to basically tell you exactly the pattern that he's going to go with for massive room-wide damage. So just pay attention to exactly where the room is going to be lit up and stay out of bad. The way that this system works is if you get hit by avoidable mechanics in the game, you're going to get one doom stack. If you get a second doom stack within the 2 minutes, it's unfortunately going to mean death to you right away. So it is kind of a little bit of a mercy, but pay close attention to those doom stacks and play accordingly. Or at best, if you can try to avoid the damage altogether, that's going to be a win-win in every book possible. So you're going to see Baleful Swath. This is going to be kind of a both sides slash, so the safe spot's going to be pretty much on his butt. That's also going to be then followed up by Baleful Blade. You'll see that the room lights up. You're going to want to go behind these walls for protection. These walls are going to come in handy in two different ways, and we'll cover that here in just a little bit. Phantom's Edge somewhat seems to change how he plays, but overall, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to worry out too much. But then he's going to follow this back up with another Baleful Blade, and in this case, it's actually going to do that knockback. So pay close attention to the floor, and then use the walls to make sure that you don't go into the bad surrounding the ring. So pay close attention to Iron Impact. This is going to be a line AoE stacker, so as that has it marked, make sure everybody gathers up, and that way you can avoid and mitigate through that damage. Then you're going to see Iron Splitter. Pay close attention to where he has his sword, and you're going to want to avoid the color in which that his sword is stacked in. He's going to jump, and he's going to change the color, and so just be paying close attention, because you do not want to stand in the circles that he has currently got lit up. Now, during the fight, he's going to occasionally do Verdant Path. This is going to give him a different type of color, which basically changes how his fighting pattern works with Baleful Blade. Note that he's going to do Baleful Blade, and there's also going to be chains. This is going to function kind of like brambles, so you're going to want to stack together, run far apart, break the chain, run back to in, and then make sure that you've got that wall behind you for the knockback. So he's going to start stacking up his different mechanics together, obviously making the fight a little bit more challenging, making sure that you're paying close attention to each activity that he is at the moment doing. Then he's going to do Dead Iron. This is going to be a skill in which that he marks a couple of different targets, and it's going to be a conal AoE blast on the targets that he's marked. So just pay close attention if you're marked, and if you're standing close to somebody who's marked, so that way you can avoid them altogether. He'll do another Verdant Path, and then you're going to see Act of Mercy. This is going to be an X, basically line AoEs going from him all the way out. So just avoid those altogether. And then he'll start stacking up more of his Mercies and other damaging abilities together. And then as far as mechanics goes, he's going to do Seasons of Mercy, in which you're going to see these frosty line horizontal items dashed out for you. Just pay attention not to look at the orb at the same time as you're avoiding the different dashes that are happening across the level. It's at this point you've seen all the mechanics that he has to throw at you, and ultimately you just need to continue to DPS him down as best you can and avoid as much damage as possible. But doing this will allow you to collect his rewards and move on to boss number 2. Boss number 2 is Dahu. He's an alligator type reptilian monster that hopefully you enjoy fighting. You've seen this kind of model before, and his mechanics shouldn't surprise you all that much, but there's a couple of tricks that he has up his sleeve, and hopefully this helps get you prepared. You're going to see right-sided shockwave followed by left-sided shockwave, left being the much faster executed out of the two different abilities that he has. So pay close attention and make sure that you're either stacked behind him so you can avoid the damage altogether. He's going to follow this up with Feral Howl. This is going to be a knockback in which it's just going to push everybody to the walls. This is going to come more into play later when it starts stacking with other mechanics. From here, he'll do Fire Breath. This is a conal AoE in one direction. Later, he's going to level this up and he's going to spin around the room doing that same conal AoE. So we'll cover that here more in just a little bit. It's at this point the mechanics start stacking up and start heating up. He's going to summon these line creatures that are going to do line dashes throughout the level. So obviously the easiest thing is to not stand in them. However, they're going to then shift into these explosion AoEs. He's going to pair this up with Feral Howl, which is that knockback. So you want to make sure you don't get knocked into any of the different AoEs from the different lion creatures. These will come back and play here in just a little bit as well. So here's where he's going to start doing the Fire Breath and start spinning around the room. So you just need to avoid, again, these are big conal AoEs, so it takes up quite a bit of damage. It's easiest just to stack on his tail and run with him as he turns. Now at this point he's going to start dropping rocks randomly on different targets, so just run out of the bad and avoid stacking up too much together. Now you'll see here I got hit by his dash. He's going to dash one direction and then he's going to dash completely in the other direction and follow this up with Fire Breath, thus taking up a huge chunk of the playing field. So pay attention, especially on that first dash, to make sure that you can get ready and you can completely get out of that AoE. It's at this point the lions will come back, and so will the rock dropping bombs. So you're going to see lots of different AoEs playing the field, and you just need to make sure you're paying close attention to where you are, where you're going, and what's going on around you. He's going to pair this with right side and left side shockwaves, so just be careful, especially if you're a melee and you're in melee range, that you don't get hit while trying to avoid the dashes that are happening across the level. Finally, finishing this off with Feral Howl and the different AoEs with the lions that are surrounding him. It's at this point you should have seen all the mechanics that he has to throw at you. Continuing to DPS him down will allow you to move on to boss number 3. Or maybe perhaps we should say bosses. In this case, we're going to be fighting the Queen's Knight, Soldier, Gunner, and Warrior. At the start of the fight, we're going to fight all 4 of them. It's pretty basic. You just need to pick one, DPS them for a little bit, because eventually they're going to start taking turns. Each one has their own mechanics, and you want to pay close attention to these, because these mechanics are going to come in later when you start fighting the final boss of this raid. So for the sake of this, in case they decide to do it in a different order at any point in time, we're going to start with the Queen's Gunner. The Gunner is going to open up with automatic turret. This is going to place 2 turrets on the ground with a pointing arrow. Now that arrow is basically going to be a line dash AoE that happens really quick and then just darts across the screen. This is going to get a little bit more complex with more turrets here in a little bit, but don't worry about that too much. Then you're going to see Queen Shot. This is a room-wide AoE, and then follow back up with automatic turret, which is going to then put out more turrets around on the ground. You'll also see Shot in the Dark. This appears to be somewhat of a tank buster for the Gunner, but overall it didn't seem to be doing all that much damage, so I wasn't ultimately too worried about it at the time. However, just wanted to make sure that you're aware of that as another ability. Defeating the Gunner is going to bring out the next of the Queen's tools, in this case, the Queen's Warrior. You'll notice the big giant axe for the Warrior. The Warrior has a couple of mechanics on their own, the main thing being Bomb Slinger. This is going to put out various bombs around the room in which that you're going to want to go stand and stack on one. Now, by default, unless there's a kind of a switching mechanic, which you'll notice with lines, you're going to want to go stand on the fat bombs, because the fat bombs aren't going to be able to go up as high, and thus you're going to be up in the air. And when you fall back down to the ground, you're not going to get hit by any of the bombs that are around you. So just pay close attention to how that functions overall. Now, this is going to get augmented later later by them doing a skill that it basically allows them to reverse the polarity of the bombs with these purple lines. This is the reversal of forces. So in this case, you're going to want to go stand on these small bombs because they aren't going to be the ones that go all the way up to the top. And thus, as you get launched and you can fall back down to Earth, you're going to survive and not get hit by that room-wide or those bomb AoEs. Now the warrior, just like a few of these other pawns, I guess we could call them for now, have blood and bone. This is another room-wide AoE, and they can do this multiple times, causing obviously plenty of damage. So as from healing perspective, just be sure to heal through it and you guys will be just fine. The warrior also has a skill called Rapid Sever. This is another tank buster style move, so just pay close attention and make sure your tanks and whoever they're targeting is purely mitigated as best as possible. Now with the warrior down, this brings us to the soldier. The soldier looks very much like the gunner, except for obviously from the weapon difference, this being a sword. So from here, you'll see his first ability, Double Gambit. This is going to have him put clones or copies onto the arena of himself. He's then going to do Secrets Revealed, in which you'll see these electric lines targeting two of the different dummies, which you want to go and stand on the one or the two dummies that do not have or the line. Everybody's going to line up with an AoE around them, thus causing maybe a little bit of panic, but the dummies are not going to explode, and thus you'll be safe standing on them. Later in this fight, they'll actually jump around, thus making it a little bit more complicated, so just kind of pay attention to it. But the first round is there to just teach you the mechanic in the first place, thus as you survive it, you'll be good to go. For when they're jumping around, they're not doing too many complex moves, so you should be able to see them. However, they can jump clear across the room. It might be helpful to have an eye on the two of them, but if you just focus in on one, you should have plenty of time to be able to get to them without issue. With the soldier down, we now come to the Queen's Knight. Sword and shield in hand, and the mechanics should be fairly straightforward, but again, we will be seeing these later. He's going to do either Shield Omen or Sword Omen. For Shield Omen, this is something you want to stack up under him for the safe space to stand. Sword Omen is going to function in a complete opposite way, obviously where you do not want to stack up on him, so pay close attention whether he's doing shield or sword, and then essentially when the skill optimal play is going off, that's going to be what executes the different stance that the Queen's Knight is in. The Knight will also continue to use Blood and Bone and Sever, which essentially you've seen before already in this fight. Beating the Knight down will bring out all four of the different pawns, and they're all going to have a shield on them. Now, what's going to be real important is that this shield is going to change, and you're going to see some locational based attacks. So do not attack them where the shield is strongest, because it's going to put out a reflect on you and thus even push you outside the ring. So just be very cautious, and you want to be attacking them from the available spot in the shield itself. Occasionally that's going to go down, so you'll just kind of have to take a look at who you're attacking, so that way you'll find a safe spot. They're all going to be charging up their special abilities, and if they go off, you end up losing and you're going to have to reset the fight. So just pay close attention to where they are, and that way you can go ahead and DPS them down for the win and move on to boss number 4. So now you've come face to face with the Bozjan Phantom. This is an excellent fight, one actually the ones that I really enjoyed the most. Not that many mechanics to deal with, but enough that can kind of get you tripped up the first time you see it, and a couple things that you really need to make sure that you're positioned correctly to encounter. So the Phantom's first ability is Weave Miasma. You're going to see a purple line on the field, and you're going to see a couple of shapes. The circle represents the donut shape. This is going to have you stack close to it at first. There's going to be a knockback later on in the fight, but just note the first time it's going to teach you how to use it, and you're going to want to go stack in the center of the donut and move quickly as the donut progresses down the field. You can see that it moves pretty quickly, and it's easy to get quickly caught into the damage circle, and obviously you don't want that because that's not going to be fun for anybody. So just move with the donut as it progresses down the field. This is going to get a little bit more complex with more donuts and more lines here in just a little bit. The Phantom's going to keep casting Weave, and then you're going to have to repeat this. The second time they cast Weave, you're going to see the two donuts and the lines, thus reducing any kind of safe space that you had the first time. So again, go line yourself up, position your camera correctly, just keep moving, and you'll survive this without any problem. So the next ability the Phantom's going to teach you is Summon. This is going to have a huge raid knockback, so just pay attention to where the lines are coming from. They're going to follow this up with a conal AoE, so it's important to get knocked around and then be able to get into the right position. Now they start going to weaving their abilities together, Summon and Miasma. Now if you go ahead and run like you're planning on the donuts as before, note that you're going to have to run all the way back across the arena to be able to set yourself up for the knockback. The knockback will knock you into the center of the donut if you're positioned correctly. Otherwise, it's a small adjustment, and you should have plenty of time to be able to get into the circle and be able to move down the playing field. And as that finishes, just watch out for that conal AoE, which is going to put, again, a huge chunk of the arena on guard. At this point, you should be easily able to DPS the boss down and move on to boss number 5. Trinity Avowed, or otherwise known as the Hot and Cold boss, has one key and memorable mechanic, Hot and Cold, which we'll cover here in detail, especially because it has a couple of different modifiers which can catch you off guard. But it's nothing that you can't handle. I think you'll be able to get it easily, either watching this video or running it once or twice in this case. But they also have a couple of other items that you need to be aware of. Wrath of Bozjan. This is going to be a cone AoE towards the tank, so just kind of stay clear of that ability. There's not going to be anything on the ground. That's just going to have to be something you remember. Then you have Glory of Bozjan. This is room-wide AoE, so healers just be prepared for it. Heal through it, and make sure everybody is stacked up beforehand. Now they're going to do Aldernert Arsenal. In this case, this is a modification of their abilities, so just kind of pay attention. Then you have Fury of Bozjan. This is an AoE on the boss themselves. You'll see this stacking on the ground, and you should be able to survive it plenty fine. Now we've finally come to Hot and Cold, the key defining element of the boss itself. It's going to place an indicator over your head, either 1 fire or 2 fire or 1 ice and 2 ice. The goal is to mitigate or basically return your temperature to normal. They're going to have a couple mechanics. The first one you're going to see is the bombs. You're going to see 2 fire and 2 ice. Play close attention, either way, to which symbol you have over your head and match it with the opposite element, and you'll survive it just fine. Now, you'll see that if you got 1 stack, you're going to want to match 1. The first time, I think it's pretty basic just to teach you the mechanic itself, but then you'll see 1 or 2, and you're going to want to make sure you get hit by the element that turns that off. If you are left with any of them on, it will kill you, so just pay attention for that. Then you see Flash Vein. This is going to be a massive, almost semi-room wide. The only safe spot is stacking on her butt, so just be sure to do that. Then you see Flames of Bozjan. This is a massive ability that's going to basically put you into 1 lane on the room itself. This is then going to be paired with other abilities, just like we've seen, like Hot and Cold. So you're going to now have a little bit of a variation to Hot and Cold, what we've seen before. So again, pay close attention to the symbol that you have, but you're going to want to be looking at the wall, and there's going to be patterns on the floor themselves, and you'll see some arrows that are going to track down the pathway. So you just want to match the arrow's path to the element that you want removed, and just go stand exactly where it's at, and thus it's going to then hit you and set your temperature into the correct area. So that's going to be how you pass that check. With Ardent Arsenal and Infernal Slash, you'll see that they changed their weapons from the bow and arrow to the sword and shield, this making the stacking mechanic in front of her in this case. So just kind of pay attention to what they're doing. They're going to give you plenty of time to move that. Now with Hot and Cold, you can see Blade of Entropy. This is going to be the element of the blade, and it's going to tell you how many items it's got stacked. In this case, I've got 2 ice and it's got 2 fire with this attack, thus putting me back to normal, but it's going to be half of the room, so pay close attention to the element and the number and symbol that is attached to it, thus so you can balance your elements correctly. This is going to hurt you, so healers need to make sure that you're healed up in this case, but as long as you got a balanced temperature, you're going to be just fine in this case. The final mechanic that you really need to be aware of is Unseen Eye. This is going to put copies of herself across the arena, and they're going to do dashes, so you just need to find a safe spot to stand that isn't going to be hit by any of the copies of herself running around the room. At this point, you just continue to DPS her down, and then you can finally move on to the final boss of this encounter, the Queen. So as long as you've been paying attention to several of the mechanics that you've already seen in this fight, there are not going to be too many things that trip you up. But Ephorian Inquiry, in this case, is going to be your room-wide AoE that the Queen's going to put out. They're going to open up with this, so healers just be ready to heal through it, and you'll be just fine. Then you're going to see Cleansing Slash. This is your tank buster, so just pay attention to your tank's life, mitigate as best as possible. And overall, that's nothing too, I think, too troubling that you need to worry about, especially during this fight. The Queen will then introduce you to Queen's Will. There are going to be 2 pawns on the playing field, a chessboard if you will, and you're going to see an indicator, a light, showing you how many spaces are going to move. They're going to have a cross X shape damage that's going to go out from the position they move to, and this is going to only get stacked up with other mechanics that we've already seen so far in this dungeon, plus a few new ones. So just make sure you avoid where they're going to be, and you'll be just fine. So now the Queen's going to use Northstain's Glow. This is where you're going to see these orbs and these lines that are going to fill. Wherever they connect, there's going to be a big AoE circle. You're going to see me get clipped by this, by these different intersections. There's not a lot you can do, but you just got to find out where these lines are not going to connect. This is then going to be followed up with a big blue line knockback ability, which is going to push players outside the arena. If you go outside the arena, you die. So just be very careful with this. The Queen's then going to continue to follow it up with the mechanics that you've seen up at this point, and then they're only going to start stacking on top of one another. The next time you see Queen's Will, you'll actually find that while the pieces are moving, the Queen is going to be on the outside of the arena, and she's going to choose to dash through the arena with one side of her sword lit up, thus basically taking half the arena and knocking them out. So just pay close attention to that as it goes forward. Then you're going to see God Save the Queen. This is going to be another raid-wide AoE damage, so just make sure that you heal through it and then you can survive it. It's at this time where you're going to see Queen's Edict, and then this is going to play into putting a symbol over your head, which is going to have you move a set number of squares. You cannot move back into the same square, otherwise it will count up. The goal is to move basically distance, not the set number of squares, and if you move too far, you can always move back and set yourself back up to the right number. This is then also going to be stacked with everything that we've seen so far, so this is going to have you do a slight bit of math calculation in future iterations. It's at this time you're going to start to see relentless play. This is where the Queen's going to summon 2 of the different pawns that we've seen earlier in the dungeon, in the fight, and they're going to do their mechanics, and this is only going to stack again further on each other. Right now you can see the gunner and the warrior are out and about, and so you just want to make sure you avoid the line AoEs followed by the bombs. This is going to get even more complex because you're going to see the blue line, which has the knockback. Do not worry, you're actually going to have plenty of time to move where you need to, so just make sure you don't get knocked outside of the arena, because then you can find a fat or skinny bomb so that you can be safe from the explosions and thus continue the fight. So here's another example of Queen's Edict in which that you're going to see the soldier and the warrior, not the warrior in this case, the soldier and the knight, where they're connected together, and thus you're going to see the different pawns being lit up, finding the safe spot to stand, and the soldier doing the shield or sword omen along with the dash across the room. So lots of things going off at once. I didn't clearly see that, but obviously that is a massive enough hit that I'm going to go down in this case. So just pay very close attention to this mode, because there's going to be a lot of different things happening at once, and the goal is to not panic and just make sure you're aware of where the boss is standing at all times. So here's another example where you have the bombs going off as well, and the line, especially with everything going on screen, it can get quite busy. Just note that the entropy is in effect, and if you don't see it, you're going to end up going to the wrong bomb like I did in this case, but the lines actually happen a little bit sooner, and you've seen it actually in this video. So just kind of pay close attention to see if that has the system of lines in play. Thus, you can hopefully stand on the correct bomb and not necessarily keep falling and eating dirt like a silly little floor tank. And we all know who I'm talking about. Not me in this case, only unfortunately I did tank a lot of the floor in this fight, in this boss fight for filming. But overall, it's been an incredibly fun and engaging piece of content. These bosses and this raids, I have to say, it's some of my favorite content that I am enjoying right now in the game. Not that it's just new, but I think it's just what really feels ultimately like a really true raid in and of itself. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Hopefully this guide's been a help. If it has, let us know in the comments below. If there's anything I missed, let me know in the comments below, and hopefully we'll see you on stream or in future videos. But for Work to Game, my name is Brian. Thanks for watching. Hope you have a good one, and I hope to see you soon. But until then, take care. This video is sponsored by me, Ginger Prime. Hopefully you'll check out my podcast channel, Ginger Gaming Radio, which we have lots of guests, lots of great conversations, and even more highlights. Links are in the description below. Let me know what you think. Thanks.